In today's video, I show you my fully painted set for Company of Heroes 2. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of June of 2025, we have a pledge for Darkshire 2 Kickstarter from Decals. We have 2 pledges for the Kraken Studios Fantasy Stadium's Gates of Glory Kickstarter coming up. And we have $100 going towards a crowdfunding campaign, which my Patreon supporters are voting upon. Go ahead and use the link below to go to my Patreon page where you can find out more information on how you can get in on this month's gratitude gifts. So I went all in on the Company of Heroes 2nd edition Kickstarter, and I purchased an extra box of the Wehrmacht faction so that we can play 6-player 3v3, and the all-in pledge included the expansions as well. So what you're seeing here is all of the vehicles and infantry for 6 armies, with one of them being a repeat of the Wehrmacht. This video is broken up into a couple different sections, so use the timestamps below. And the painting tutorial is at the end of the video, so make sure to check that out if this is helpful for you. But I did speed paint everything, not using speed paints per se or the slap chop method, but actually everything here is painted with craft paint. So you don't need to buy expensive miniature paints, because craft paints is about $1 for a huge bottle of paint, which will take a very long time before you will run out. Also, I spray prime everything, typically with a dark brown color, but all that information is in the painting tutorial. If you've never painted anything before, I think this is a great set to start with because it's relatively quick and easy. So all of this that you see here, I painted up in 2 weeks. And if you haven't seen my How to Paint the Terrain video, go ahead and check that out here. I have that in 2 different sections, so I'm linking you to part 1. But that was also equally relatively easy to paint up. So this entire set you should be able to paint up, well within a month if you apply yourself. And I want to encourage you if you've never painted before, because look at the table presence of this game. It is so awesome. So being able to put even a little bit of color on your units is just going to make it stand out that much more. And the immersion is amazing. There are a couple of things here on the board that actually I 3D printed, and I will provide links in the video description below if you are interested in going. They are free files on Thingiverse. They are these paratrooper dice, which is totally unnecessary. You could totally get away with just using the regular dice, but I just love the fact that they have these parachutes on them. Also, these encampments along with these bigger guns. And these Ford HQ buildings, 1 for the Russians, and I printed out 3 for the British. But again, those are totally unnecessary. It's just purely to maintain the immersion and the aesthetic on the board. Now that I've painted up everything, I do plan on coming out with a battle report because I don't see that many online. The ones that are available tend to be from the 1st edition, and they've made a number of good rule changes to the 2nd edition, and I don't see a lot of those, or the ones that are available are so long that they are hard to watch through. So I will be coming out with one of the battle reports, and hopefully that'll give you a sense and an idea of how this game plays. I really do like the rule set. It hits the right spot for me where it is simple enough that it's not super complicated, but there is a lot of options, as you can see here, and expansions, so that you can have more tactical variety strategy that you can implement. So totally looking forward to diving into this game. Also, there's an active Discord channel. If you want to try out the game, or if you are unable to get a hold of the game right now because it's still shipping to backers, then go ahead and go to the Discord channel for Bad Crow Games, and you can jump in on a tabletop simulator game and try it out there. The guys over at Bad Crow Games did tell me that there's only one site where this is available online in the United States that is at Miniature Market, and that's a pre-order. But I gotta be honest with you, because of all the chaos of the tariffs from China, it's gonna be hard to say when that's gonna be coming in. I know backers are still trying to sort through their options for getting the set, whether that is air freighted in or whether or not it's waiting and seeing about the whole tariff situation. I did opt to pay the extra money to air freight before the tariffs kicked in. That's why I was able to get my set relatively early, but it is a little bit of a mess right now. I do know that other countries are getting their packages and are starting to post, so hopefully there will be more battle reports online soon. I'm going to go ahead and do my outro here since the rest of the video is just walking through some of the details and then the painting tutorial. But go ahead and please subscribe. I've noticed that most of you are not subscribed to my channel. I'm hoping to get up to 50,000 subscribers. So please, if you haven't had a chance, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, especially if you're interested in more Company of Heroes 2 videos. So happy painting, happy gaming. We'll see you next time. So here's how everything looks in storage. But first off, I wanted to tell you that we did receive 2 of these sheets for the all-in pledge, and I really only needed to use 1 sheet and still had some left over, except for the fact that I had a second Wehrmacht army, and so I needed to grab these Iron Crosses from them just for the second Wehrmacht army. So with the all-in, if you didn't get a 6th army, I think you can get away with just 1 sheet of decals. Although I will say that I wish I would have used order transfer decals, just because even with the spray, you can totally tell that these are stickers. So even with a dull coat, it's still a little bit shiny. So, oh well, not a huge deal, but that's just one of the things I would suggest is if you are really going to paint up all your models, go ahead and just buy transfer decals for 15mm. I don't remember what the scale is specifically. They usually don't use millimeters, but I wish I would have done that. But otherwise, this is what they all look like in storage. So this is the base of the U.S. Army, and I just throw all of my heavy weapons and whatnot in here. And this is what you're going to get in the base set without any of the expansions. And then this is the Wehrmacht army that I just did in gray. And this is what is in the base set again. Now there is space and slots in here to be able to distribute some of your heavy weapons maybe. Although I stuck just the flags in here. So sort of you can decide how you want to do it. I'm thinking about creating a 3D printing solution where all of the expansions for each army goes into a box, but I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do that. Here's the British player set. And in here, this is what is in the base set with the extra turrets up here. And then what's different about this player set is that you have the emplacements, 4 of them, that you stick in right here. I go ahead and put the purple dye, and then I also put these guns over here because it doesn't really fit very well. Here's the OKW set, and what's unusual about the OKW is that instead of having the split vac trays, this is all just one vac tray, so you can't lift that out. I think it's because of these units here that they needed to have one vac tray, which I don't think is a big deal. But one thing I don't like is that I had to mix all of my infantry in with my colored cubes here. There isn't a separate tray. I might 3D print an insert that goes in there to separate those two things out, but who knows? I say all this stuff, and most of the time, 90% of the time, I actually don't do it because it isn't really worth the time and energy to do it because it's not like critical. The base Soviet player set, and this is what all the units look like with the extra turrets in here. And I'm not sure if I'm going to store the Eastern Reinforcements pack units in here as well. Again, not quite sure if I'm going to keep the expansion separate from the base boxes. Here's my second Wehrmacht player set. And when I kickstarted this, I sort of did a poll and asked people what they thought I should get a second or a sixth army. And they said either the OKW or another Wehrmacht. So I just went ahead with the Wehrmacht set. And this took the longest to paint, obviously, because of the camouflage. Now we're getting into the expansions. And if you want an expansion that has a lot more armor options, the Elite Commander set, I think, is really a good expansion to get, because look at how many extra units that you're getting. In retrospect, I wish I would have painted one of each of these in the camouflage, but it was honestly easier just to paint gray like this. But overall, I think this is a good expansion to get. Another good expansion, just to give you more armor options, is the Lost Brigades, because you're again getting, and none of these expansions, you know, you're not getting the best bang for your buck if you don't have all 5 factions, because you're getting units in each one of the factions. But yeah, this is a cool set. I did not bother painting any of the inserts for these half tracks, these German half tracks, just because it just seems so fiddly. So I just made all of these the same. What I should have done probably was make one of each of the options, but I wanted to get these done as fast as possible, so I just went ahead with that. But other than that, I think this is a really good set. I love these bulldozer Shermans with the optional different turrets up here, so these are super cool. I have no idea how they play though, so we'll see. Here's the Pathfinder pack, which I think for the most part allows you to have infantry parachute in, and then you have these awesome elephants, which again, wish I would have painted one gray and one camo, but I don't know if it makes that big of a difference. Here's the Eastern reinforcements for the Russian army. You have these female guard, and then these 152s. The Stug assault pack. I feel like the Germans get a lot from these small box expansions. Now here I did split half of them to be the OKW and half to be the Wehrmacht camouflage color pattern. And then the captured Panther pack, which has these Panthers, and then you have these flagpoles because you stick on there the faction flagpole of whoever captures them. And I wish that these had some indicator printed somewhere saying which expansion they're part of, because when you mix these all in, I wish there was an easy way to separate it out. Obviously, if you look here, you'll be able to tell because it says captured here, but I wish there was an easy way or a small symbol that they had put to say which expansion it came with. That way you can separate it out again. So here's the US Army all finished up. This is in the base box, and then these are all of the expansion pieces. Pretty much the soldiers are all the same, except for these observers, which I think can spot camouflage units, and then these bazooka guys. I don't know why the other armies don't have observers like this, but this is an option to be able to put on your infantry plate along with a die that shows that. This is the Jeep, which was pretty quick to paint up. And then 3 of these. And if you can notice here, there's a lot of excess area around the stickers. I tried to cut this circle out with an X-Acto blade, but it was really hard to do, so at the end I didn't bother doing that. But it did limit where I was able to put the stickers and place the stickers on here. Here's the Shermans. And this is the optional turret. And this is a regular turret. These are the only ones with sandbags in the front of them. And then the M10s. The expansions, here's the bulldozer with the optional turret. And then the Pershings. But notice how just on these turrets, there's really no spot to be able to put any of the stickers on there, so I ended up just putting one right here in the front. And I'm sure that the placement of these decals aren't historically accurate, but I just placed them wherever I could find them. And then this Calliope is super interesting. I never was aware that there was a missile rack placed on top of Shermans. So these are interesting. So here is the Wehrmacht faction. Again, this is the base box here. And then here are the expansions from the elite commanders. And then these three half tracks are from the Lost Brigades. This is 3D printed. Latham from the forums actually created these STL files. So this is the Pack 43 emplacement. It might be the Lost Brigades expansion that has this as an option, but I 3D printed this. I think it turned out looking super cool. But everything else here is from the base set, from these machine guns to these grenadiers with a missile launcher, and then these individual infantry. Even though it's a simple gray, I like how it sort of turned out, and when you do the layered dry brushing, you don't have to do any of the washes to sort of get that weathered look and effect. And I'm also glad I went sort of the muddy track route, because I think that warm color contrasts really nicely with the cooler gray colors. And these Panzer IVs, again, I wanted to put a sticker on there, but it's too narrow to do that. So again, I could have cut the excess sticker off in order to put it on there. And I like these little Kubelwagons. These tigers look super cool, and I know that they wouldn't put insignia on top of a tank. It would be here on the side, but again, the sticker is too wide to be able to put on there, so I stuck it on top instead. Here's the Jagd Panther, and I made the tracks on there sort of rusted and muddy as well. And then these big boys, the King Tiger, look super cool. Here's the Soviet Army, and this is the base box here. Have all of the infantry that was relatively easy to paint up. And then you have these guys, and again, because of all the little bumps everywhere, I was only able to stick the star right here, and some of it I used the gray star, and the other one's the red one. And could probably have stuck something on here, but I did paint these with the silver on the tracks rather than it being muddy, just because of the base red undercoating. I thought that provided enough of a weathering effect look on there. And then these T-34s have the interchangeable turret. I will say that on a lot of these models, getting the turret on and off is difficult. So I used an X-Acto blade and sort of carved down because this is super tight. So in a lot of the models that don't have interchangeable turrets, I didn't bother. So for example, like on this thing barely moves. It is so tight it barely moves. But I probably won't be turning it anyway. So on the ones where I don't change out the turret, I actually don't bother loosening it up. Some of them are loose, like for example these KVs. They're relatively loose, so they're easy to turn, but a lot of them they're not. This is from the expansion along with these tanks, the 152s. And these are the sharpshooters. And then this is again from Latham, 3D printed STL file for the forward HQ emplacement. It isn't a perfect file, and you can only place one of these, so I only printed out one. And then these really tiny T-70s. Again, their turret doesn't really turn a whole lot, but again, I don't really care. I probably won't be turning it around in game, so it doesn't matter as much. Here's the KV-8. I decided to go ahead and put the thing I like about these numbers is it has a little bit of white surrounding it, so a little bit easier to pick out. The IS-2, I just put the star on there. And it's sort of hard to tell, but this is the gray one. And let me see if I can find, yeah, this is the red one, if you see here. And then I put the 100 on there. Just, it's a little bit hard to see though because it's just the outline, but I know that it's probably not for this faction, some of these numbers, but I just stuck it on wherever it fit and wherever I could. Here's the OKW faction, and the only expansion pieces are these ones, Flame Panzers. That is part of the Lost Brigades, and then these Stugs. Again, I painted two of these in the camouflage version. What I really like about this is I really like this orangish red color because it contrasts so well with the blue. Those are complementary colors, and I really like how, especially here with the Pumas as well, how good it looks against that dark blue. So really like how these colors came out. And then you have these cool little motorcycle half tracks, which looks cool. And then unique to this faction are these flak guns. And then I think this is supposed to be the Pak 43. I might be wrong. I'm not quite sure what gun that is. And the infantry, I put a little bit of that orange right there on the belt. But they look cool with their little submachine gun right there. And then these behemoths, the Sturm Tiger, looks super cool, but again, not a lot of area to be able to put a decal on there, so I had to stick a small one on. And then these are the forward bases. I think these look super cool. And this is a supply truck that apparently you can fit all that stuff in the back of the supply truck, which is funny. Here's their version of the Panther. I'm probably most excited to play this faction just because it has such unique dynamics. Here's the British, and there's two infantry units, looks like one with machine guns. And then here are the regular soldiers with rifles. And this is the base set over here. I struggled a little bit to figure out where to place the stickers on these units. I ended up putting 3 on here. I probably could have gotten away with not putting one in the front like that. And look at the big boy, the Churchill. I ended up putting the number there, and then on the opposite side the bigger insignia. And with these I did decide to just keep the tracks dark brown, but I didn't do the mud all over the place just because it wouldn't contrast very well with the tan. And here's the alternative turret. These guys, I could only fit the symbol on the turret in the back. And these are the emplacements that come with the game. And this is what it looks like with one of these. I think it's anti-flak, I'm not sure what that is. But I want to compare it to over here. This is the 3D printed one, the same one that I showed with the Wehrmacht emplacement, and I sort of like it better. It's actually a hexagon in shape. And then this is the 17 pounder, which I think looks way more significant than this thing to be on the board. And it does fit in here really nicely. Although I'm not sure whether, I think the front is this way so that you can put dice into these 2 spots. So I think it's supposed to go this way, like this. And then here are all the expansions, which there is a lot of. This is the Comet. And because of this thing here, I couldn't fit another sticker on there. So there's just one on the turret. And here's the Sexton. Again, because these little bumps in there makes it hard to put the sticker on without it raising up. Here's a Firefly. I'm not 100% sure what these arms are, whether they're guns, machine guns. I'm not 100% sure. I tried to Google it and look it online, but I couldn't find it. So make a comment below if you know what that is. So I would be curious about that. And then these are the Valentine 11s that come in the Lost Brigades expansion. And these are the, again, 3D printed emplacements, HQ forward emplacements. And I asked the publisher if there's any limit to these, whereas the Russians you can only have one at a time, and there is no limit to these. So I printed out 3. I don't know if I would ever have 3 emplacements out at the same time. Who knows, but I didn't want to have to go back and print more, so it's better to have extra. So here is my second Wehrmacht army, and I decided to try out some camouflage paint. This isn't canon. I just randomly made stripes of this rusty red color and the green, and added some of the stickers on various spots. But again, this is the base set. The way that the camo turned out on the soldiers, because they're so tiny and small, it almost looks like candy striping instead of real camo, which is a little bit more random, but that's basically how they turned out. Along with the mortars, it sort of looks like a candy cane because of that. And then here are the machine guns. I like how these turned out though. I sort of wish that I would have done more of a pattern like this on the vehicles, but that's fine. I'm definitely not going to spend that much more time because these did take a lot more time to do this than any of the other armies, so I did these last. And for the most part, I wanted these to look pretty different than from the gray Wehrmacht from my original. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I decided to also go with silver for the tracks rather than having it be the muddy, weathered look. And again, that's because the base is brown and tan, so it wouldn't stand out as much. Considering that I didn't have an airbrush, I basically, stippled all of the colors on there. I think I'm relatively happy, although like I mentioned before, I wish I would have done more of a tiger pattern on them. Here are the captured panthers. And then the Stugs. So overall, pretty happy with this version. Alright, so I went ahead and base primed these the same dark brown spray primer. So this is the core box, and I included all of the heavy weapons as well. So one of the things that happens when you spray prime these is that it's going to be harder to put these in. So I just twist it a couple of times, but it's still going to be a pretty tight fit. So try to scrape the paint off of the base here. And I don't know how often I'm going to be switching these turrets out anyway, even if I upgrade. But for some reason, these just slip right in. So this isn't a big deal. But this is pretty tight. So I might actually end up sanding some of this down here. So the first thing is, there's a couple of spots where I missed the spray paint. So see how the green is coming through. So I just have black here. And I'm just going to fill those spots in like that. Super simple, like I did it here inside the turret, and here too. The spray paint did get down in there, so I just dabbed it with this brush with some black just to fill it out like that. Alright, so I don't know if you've seen these kind of brushes. These are marketed as dry brush brushes, and the brand I got is Army Painter. It comes in a set of 3. I think it was like 15 bucks. I'll leave a affiliate link, Amazon affiliate link, in the description below if they have this available. But it just helps with dry brushing. You can use other brushes if you want, but I just found these worth the investment to get these. And I am gonna start off with Hauser Dark Green, and it's basically this super dark green. We'll go ahead and use this Pershing, and the point of it is to still maintain the dark brown as an undercoat. So in spots you'll still see, as part of the shading, this dark brown will remain. And I'll go ahead and take the turret off so that I have more access to it. But see how in the crevices it still remains dark brown, and that just gives it a little bit more depth. And then go back to this and be able to get these spots here. So again, you got the dark brown. And right now, I don't care if I get some on the tracks. Doesn't really matter. Like so. And then that's what it looks like on the Jeeps and this tank. And then on the infantry, it's basically the same thing. Super quick and easy. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and grab some avocado, which is a olive green. And I'm not going to go over everything, but just highlighting some spots. Like so. I'm doing the same for the soldiers and infantry. super quick. Alright, now I have some Hauser light green. It's pretty darn light, and because of that, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the olive, just a little bit, just to tone it down. And then you don't want that much on your brush, so I'm going to take some of it off because this is the final highlight color. And so I just want a little bit on the edges, and that's it. Just like that, to highlight all of the edges. Alright, I'm grabbing some black. I'm going to start off with just all of the heavy weapons. The entire thing is going to be painted black. And I think I'm going to keep the bases brown for the US. Do all of the tires. And then any metal, I'm going to put black. And then on the Jeeps, the steering wheel and the chairs, or the seats.
Remembers, therefore it never happened. Complaining about being slandering me to brother's girlfriend served us.
I'm going to go ahead and grab some milk chocolate, but you can grab any brown that you want. I'm going to color all of the cloth and bags. And the handles of the tools. And then I'm going to paint the sandbags the same color as the terrain sandbags. Alright, grabbing some burnt umber. There's a couple of places where the tracks got covered with the green. And then because this burnt umber is lighter than the spray primer, I just put some on, just a little bit like that. Because we're going to put a different color brown on there for the mud. But this will just create a little bit of variability. Alright, I'm grabbing some sable brown. This is what I used for the sandbags on the terrain. I'm also using the same color for the flesh tones for the hands on the rifleman and the faces. Basically, I'm just dabbing it on there. Grabbing some Rookwood Red, and then there are these boxes. Again, I have no idea what they are really, or what color they really should be. I'm only doing this just to add a little bit of color, a different color onto these. And since I have various shades of brown in other places, thought that this sort of reddish brick color would look good, like so. And then the only other tank that has that are the Shermans on the back right here, along with the sandbags in the front. Might make this black. Not sure what that is. Also, I decided to color this wire running down the bulldozer tank. Not sure what it is, but adds just a little bit more color to it, like so. Then I just go back with some black for these metal bands. At this point, these are all just details. You don't have to do any of this stuff. So if you're in a rush, you can skip a lot of these detail steps. Alright, final step, we're going to put some mud onto the tracks. This is espresso, sort of like this mud color. And again, I'm using my sort of messed up brush because I want it to be splotchy. And go ahead and hit up some of the tank itself, because dirt and mud are going to splash up to it, and then just do something like that, sort of uneven, and then here in the front as well. Sort of like that. Alright, so I'm done painting. Now it's time to put on the decals. And they gave me 2 of these sheets, so I should have enough for all of the expansions for all 4 factions. And the US forces are going to be using these white ones. Now with the Germans, I went ahead and just spray primed. Again, this is a different brown, a little bit just slightly lighter, just because I ran out. And just as easily. You know what? There's no interchangeable turrets with the German army. So I'm not going to bother loosening up the turrets like I did with the American army. Just because it's not as necessary. And you might need to do 2 coats of this. Oh, forgot to show you. This is zinc. And doing 2 coats probably is better. And I'm leaving the lower portion while I dry brush the rest of it with this gray. And I'll go back and do a second coat just because it's not covering as well. Let me show you an example here. And I lift the turret off just so that I can get underneath. But this is the first base coat, and I actually did the track wheels too. The soldiers are a little bit hard to do with such a big brush, but they went relatively quickly as well. Along with the mortars, and with these cannons or guns, big guns, I just tried to get the shield, and I'll cover over the wheels with black later. Alright, now I'm grabbing some slate gray, which is a lot lighter. And then make sure you get a lot of it off, because you don't want a ton of it on. And like usual, you want to catch the edges. So here's the before and after difference. And then here as well with this big tank. Grabbing some black. Alright, I'm grabbing some avocado. I figure because the clothes on the Germans are gray, that I can make the ground be green, because with the Americans, I don't want the ground to be too close to the same color as their uniform. But with the Germans, I think going with green is the better choice. I'm going to paint all of the gunworks black too. Alright, grabbing some sable brown, and these are the roofs to the, what's called something wagon, Kudel wagon, and it looks like we're going to need 2 coats at least. Alright, I'm grabbing some burlap to mix in with the sable brown, and so here I just grab some of both and mix it together just to make it a little bit lighter. And here I went ahead and put 2 coats on, and what I'm going to do is just go along the edges here like so. Just to make it a little bit more varied. Let me try to lighten that up a little bit more. Like that. Then put a little bit on the edges, like so. Just like that. Alright, using the same color, the color in the faces and the hands. Like so. Grabbing some burnt umber, hitting up the handles for any of the shovels that are on the tanks. I'm also going to hit the spare track pieces. And then also putting it on the track. And it doesn't matter if you get some of it onto the wheels. Alright, grabbing some zinc, which is a silver, a dark silver, and I'm going to go over the tracks, because even if they're rusted, when they're up here, they're going to still have some silver to them. Like that. Alright, going to grab espresso again to be the mud on the tracks. So here I have Stormy, which is like a darker grayish blue. I considered doing gray with these as well, but making it camo patterns on it. But I think I'm going to do that with my other German army, since I doubled up on the German army. So I go ahead and just twist it a little bit, just so that I can get around the turrets. Alright, now I'm grabbing some colonial blue. You can grab actually regular gray, but this has a little bit of a bluish tint to it. But the reason why you can get regular gray is because you're going to be mixing it anyway. So here's the colonial blue. It's a little bit too light, as you can see here. So I'm actually mixing it a little bit with the storm to just tone it down just a little bit. So make sure that there isn't too much on your brush. And then you want to be relatively sparse with this. Probably a little bit too much still on here, so let me brush that off. So just hit it with these highlights. Like so. I think that looks good. We're doing the same thing with all of the infantry. After putting down the Stormy, you want this mixture of a lighter color to just bring highlights. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab milk chocolate because just decided on a different colored base, so just randomly picked this. I thought about making this the same olive green as the regular German army, but I think I want to make them all distinct and different so that on the battlefield they're easily distinguishable from each other, rather than putting all of the Germans, you know, making them too similar, because I do want our matchups to be such that, you know, you can pick any army and play the other. You don't have to have the Axis and Ally armies all working together. Don't forget the base on these portable units, and the 2 flagpoles that come with the portables. Probably will do a second coat like I did with the other flags. And I also did the bases for the heavy guns. Alright, grabbing some sable brown. This is the color that I've consistently been using for the sandbags. So just painting up all of the sandbags around the portable sort of spawning station. Like so. Doing the top of the supply truck as well. And then once that's dry, put a second coat on. But I do it unevenly, just to emphasize these ridges on the canvas, like so. Sort of like that. Grabbing Georgia clay, adding just a little bit of color on the tips of, I think these are missiles. I'm not 100% sure what these are on the half track, but in my mind these are missiles. That's why I am dotting the front with a little bit of orangish red The other spot that I'm going to color with this is these fuel cans. And then just to add a little bit of color, I'm going to color this thing that's hanging off the back. I have no idea what that is, but I'm just doing it to add some color. These lukes also have some fuel tanks on them, so I'm going to go ahead and color them. I know it totally doesn't make sense from a camouflage perspective that these would be so bright, but I'm just doing it more from an aesthetic. And then I'm also going to be coloring all of these boxes that are on the side of the tank. I really like this sort of Georgia clay against this grayish blue. I think it makes it look super cool and stand out. Sort of inspires me if I were to paint up like a sci-fi army, like the Space Wolves or something like that. This would be a good color scheme where I would use this as the accent color, because I think it looks sharp. And then these Pumas as well have a good number of fuel tanks here. I decided to actually grab the sable brown again. In addition to using it for the sandbags, I'm going to go ahead and paint the backpacks on the infantry. I thought about making it black, but realized that it would probably be too dark, wouldn't really stand out if I painted it black. So that's why I chose this color instead. Grabbing some black. Alright, now I'm grabbing some burlap. Grabbing some burnt umber. So when you're dry brushing, the tracks, they get covered with some paint, so I'm just going over that to redarken all of the tracks and make sure that there's no blue on there. Alright, we're grabbing our trusty espresso. I like weathering my tanks so that it looks like they're used and out on the field with, mud and all that kind of stuff on them. But I know not everyone likes the worn look or the weathered look, so this is purely optional. If you want the clean look, you can make the tracks metallic. And then here are the tanks that I colored the wheels. I know in some of the other ones I didn't color the wheels and I just made it all brown, like the previous tank that I just showed you. So again, I'm using my messed up old brush because it makes it easier just to splatter up some random colors on there, random patterns, like so. And then I put some here in the front. So for the British, I'm going to go with a desert camo theme. So here is honey brown. This is going to be the basis for a lot of the units. And we're going to start off just with the ground of these emplacements. And I will probably do a second coat after this first coat dries. Here's what the second coat will look like. Actually, it's easier to completely remove the turret off the top to paint this, but I do think that these do need a second coat, so after it dries, I go ahead and just put on a second coat on top, like so. And then even the tank, the treads down here for the wheels, I'm going to color those again, make it a little bit lighter, like that. Alright, grabbing some beige. Again, I have burlap, but you can use fawn or a bunch of other ones because they keep renaming this and repackaging it, but it's a very light beige color. And this is a very subtle highlighting. And then also the infantry, super quick. I did do 2 coats of the honey brown underneath. And so here's the difference between the two. We got our trustworthy sable brown, which is what we've been using consistently for sandbags. And you can definitely layer the sandbags where you put this down first and then add some beige or some white to it to lighten it up, to do another layer of dry brushing on top. But so far I've been being consistent and just doing it a solid with this color, and then see how I leave some space so that the dark brown comes through the crevices. And that way that sort of delineates each of the sandbags. Grabbing some Georgia clay, but you can get some red or any other similar color. Painting the gas cans basically. And then there are a couple of gas tanks on some of these vehicles that I'm going to paint. Again, why would you ever put such a bright color on something that is already camouflaged everywhere else? You wouldn't, but just want to give a little bit different color since the whole thing is just beige. Alright, I have some burnt sienna. I'm using that for painting up some of the wood pieces. There's this crate. And then there's these 2 wooden covers right here. Like that. Then on these, I don't know if they're riflemen, but I'm going to paint this thing on their backs, which I actually don't know what that is. And then on these infantry, I'm just going to paint this one over here. Again, just to give it a little bit of variety. I'm grabbing some forest green. You know, I tried to use olive green, but it was just too light, so this is a little bit darker of a green, and I think it'll show up a little bit better. I'm going to do all of these cases in this green color. And there's a good number of them here. And then don't forget this one that has some kind of ball on it. Not sure what that is. And then for the infantry, we're going to do the backpack. And the belt. I'm going to do these straps. This infantry is just his belt. And then just these cross straps on his back. And the belt across here. Like so. Some zinc, which is dark gray. So it's pretty much the remainder of all the terrain features with the emplacement. Grabbing burnt umber again, painting up these bags that are on the tanks. There aren't that many for the British. And then for the infantry, I'm going to be painting up the rifles, and then just clean up the boots. Forgot to do the handles for the tools back here. And then I'm also going to paint the tracks, because I was going to sort of keep it this sandy color, but it sort of all is blending together and I want to make it more distinct. So decided to go darker, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense. Alright, so I wanted to make sure that the Russian green is different from the American green. So I am grabbing avocado, which is more of an olive green. And to change it up a bit, I spray primed this with the red primer, which is sort of like a rusty red. And because red is a complementary color to green, it's going to create sort of a nice contrast in the shading, and it will just make these tanks look distinctly different from the American Army. You can do all this spray priming with the brown that we've been using for all the other ones. Just to be clear, I spray prime most of it black, especially from underneath first, and then I just spray the top with either the dark brown, and in this case it's the red primer. Just this kind of variety, I think, makes it look interesting and different. Burnt umber again, doing the rifle, and because these guys are wearing berets, I'll go ahead and color in their face and hair just as an undercoat. And then from the Eastern Reinforcement Pack, same thing, let's do their hair. Milk chocolate, a medium brown. Just doing some black to add a different color to it. And I decided to do the tracks more in metal, because just to vary it up. Again, I don't want this to look too similar to the US faction, since they're both green. So this is just a different way to, or another way to differentiate. So the Russian armor is going to look more clean and newer, because it won't be all muddy or rusted. But first put black, and then I'll come back with a little bit of silver later.
Threatened, abandoned, and terrified. It's awful what they put you through. You were incredibly brave for setting boundaries and sticking to them in such situations.
Hard, and you get it down to half health within, what is it, a minute or two? Something like that. A second one actually spawns, and then they finger the shit out of you. Not like that, but let's look at the next. Oh, they thought they were safe. But they...
I'm grabbing some burlap, which is a beige. Just dollop the hand, the face, the other hand down here, and that's it. With the regular soldiers, you got the hand right here. Got the face, got the hand down here. Oops, sorry, that went out of focus, but that's it. Alright, now I'm grabbing some silver. This is tin from Decals art. And I'm basically dry brushing the edge of the tracks. And then here in the front. You don't have to get the whole thing. Just, that's why you put the black down ahead of it, like so. Okay, so I'm using the same honey brown that I used for the British. I'm going to use for my second Wehrmacht faction. So the same brown undercoating is going to work well. And then, just like the British, I think I'm going to have to do a second coat of this. And look at my poor dry brush. I've totally worn it down to a nub, so it's a little bit hard to get in to the crevices that I want it to go into, so I sort of have to twist it in there. But it's definitely time to get another set. Alright, so I've switched to my medium brush. This is my biggest brush, and it just isn't getting into the crevices that I want it to. So for my second coat, I'm just going to use a smaller one and put on a second coat here, just because it's not light enough with just one coat. And note that I'm still keeping some of the dark crevices here, because I still want to have some shading. You know, I think these look a little bit too dark still, so I'm going to go ahead and do exactly what I did for the British and put fawn, or you can use burlap, whatever beige color that you have, and do a once over with just to lighten it up a little bit, because I think this honey brown is a little bit too dark of a color. I'm going back to my fatter brush just because it doesn't have to be as much in the crevices at all. Alright, I am grabbing some antique maroon, or you can get Rookwood red, either one. I like this one, it's a little bit more brownish, so I'm gonna grab this. I got my little brush here, and because I don't want like super hard lines that come from a wet brush, I'm sort of stippling it like this. And then, I also raise this up so that I can get underneath here. And just basically doing some random lines and whatnot. And I thought about just sort of doing all diagonal lines so that it sort of follows a pattern, but I decided instead to just do random directions, and hopefully this will look good. This, you know, and this is not an actual camouflage pattern that the Wehrmacht used historically. I looked at a bunch of reference photos and just decided to more on the, like most of my armies that I've painted up so far, just on the rule of cool of what I think looks good instead of trying to be historically accurate. I know some people are really into making things historically accurate, but I am used to painting up fantasy armies and like Warhammer and one-page rules, both fantasy and grimdark future stuff, futuristic stuff. So that makes it so that I don't necessarily look at what's realistic, but instead paint things up according to what I think looks cool on the table. So that's basically the rule I'm following here. I know with historicals there's more incentive to make it accurate, historically accurate, but the problem with that, I think, with World War II is almost everything is green. There's very few things that don't look the same, and that's why I didn't end up getting bolt action, was because I felt like all of the miniatures, especially the soldiers, looks really the same. Like when I see them on the field in playthrough videos, they're not distinct enough with their colors because almost everything is green or brown or not super colorful or distinct from each other. I think other historicals, like before the 1800s, you know, that's different, like Napoleonics, because then, you know, everyone was super colorful, but sort of more modern World War II, everything sort of looks the same. So this is sort of what you're going for. Here's a couple more examples like this, because eventually I did a test tank. This is sort of what I'm looking for. So do the red first, and then we'll put the green on now. Alright, I am grabbing Hauser Dark Green, which is a dark green, as noted here. And before we do the tank, I want to say that, or just having the maroon on here, I think it looks pretty good just by itself. So you could decide to just stop here, but if you want a little bit extra on there, go ahead and just put some green, and I'm just putting it in between, like so. Sort of like that. Alright, so now we're putting the red on with random splooches here and there. Again, I know, don't write in the comments that the Germans never had uniforms with this camo on, so I already know that, but just doing this to distinguish this from the other Wehrmacht army, so don't give me grief about it. Alright, now grabbing some black. I know that these rifles, on the other ones, I put dark brown underneath them and then black on top for the barrel. But because there's so much color on these from the camo, I think that color would be lost, and that's why I'm going directly black. And then also doing the utility belt with black. Like so. Alright, black on the pintle weapons. And then the exhaust. And then also, we're going to do the same thing with the treads. We're going to do them black. Alright, so after painting the tires on here, I think I don't like the camo on top for the canvas. So I'm going to actually paint over it with the beige fawn. And might need to do 2 coats just to make sure that I cover up all of the camo. And here's the second coat, which is enough to cover up everything. I'm mixing a little bit of white to the beige because it looks a little too flat to me. Also sort of hit these portions like so. And that will provide a little bit more depth to the thing. And then go around, sort of feather the edges like so. Sort of like that. And that just creates a little bit of depth. Alright, now that the roof is done, I can go ahead and paint the windows black. Using the fawn for the skin tone. Alright, grabbing avocado just like I did for the original Wehrmacht faction. I'm a little bit worried because this German faction is so different compared to OKW and my first paint job. And a little bit worried that it's not going to match that much, but I don't know. We'll see. Alright, just like with the Russian tanks, I'm adding a little silver to the tracks. Then I added stickers.